Good evening. This is Stephen Ujifusa. This is a video installment of Wet Lunch on the High Seas. And today I'm going to talk a bit about anti-Semitism from a state-sanctioned perspective. And I think it's important to realize that anti-Semitism was a powerful cultural force in Europe for much of the second millennium, from the Middle Ages onward. But there were pogroms and riots against Jews, especially during the Reformation and during the bubonic plague. They were blamed for bad things that happened. But it was Russia, Imperial Russia, that really perfected the art of state-sanctioned anti-Semitism through propaganda, through passing laws that restricted Jews' already very meager civil rights, if any of them, in the Russian Empire. And I'd like to talk about a character in my book, The Last Ships from Hamburg, who really refined Russian anti-Semitism into making his country stand out compared to all other European countries. We often think of Germany as perfecting scientific anti-Semitism as a form of exterminating people. But it was Russia that used it as a tool to bring people to heel. And Tsar Alexander III, who reigned from 1881 to 1894, he was the one that really brought the whole power of the state against Russia's 4 million Jews. Now, it's important to note that he was nasty to all of Russia's ethnic minorities, namely Uzbeks, Armenians, Georgians, but it was Jews who he had particular hatred for. So I'd like to discuss Tsar Alexander III's MO, how he operated Russia as an anti-Semitic state at a time when other European countries were giving Jews more and more civil rights, most notably Imperial Germany, France, with the noted exception of the infamous Dreyfus Affair, and Great Britain. Obstinate, gruff, and not especially bright, Alexander III refused to back down from his new policy of state-sanctioned anti-Semitism. No matter that the Romanovs were among the richest families on earth and lived in a series of grand palaces, he saw himself as a strong man whose rough manners and simple tastes mirrored those of his subjects. Alexander III thought of intellectuals as dangerous, but he did revere one teacher, Konstantin Petrovich Papadonostev, a professor at Moscow State University. Papadonostev was one of Russia's most prominent legal theorists and had personally tutored Alexander in jurisprudence. He thought so highly of Papadonostev that he asked him to do the same for his own son, Nicholas. Papadonostev received a big boost to his legal arsenal when he accepted a new position, Supreme Prosecutor of the Holy Synod. Now he had the power not only of Russia's legal apparatus behind him, but the national church as well. Following the summer pogroms of 1881, Alexander III tasked several high-ranking aristocrats with investigating the so-called Jewish question. A year after he ascended the throne, he promulgated the May Laws, whose main purpose was to single out and punish Jews for the death of his father. It was also a way of distracting his troubled empire from the real problems plaguing the nation. Among them, the grinding poverty of the recently freed serfs, labor unrest in the rapidly industrializing cities, and the simmering hatred among the educated middle classes for the czarist surveillance state. Despite its vast size and enormous army, Russia was still playing catch-up to the other great powers of Europe, Great Britain, France, and the newly unified Germany. The May Laws, proposed by one of the Tsar's appointed aristocrats, Count Ignatieff, and drafted by Papadonostev, placed a number of severe restrictions on the business and personal lives of Jews living in the Pale of Settlement, excluding Poland. 1. As a temporary measure, and until a general revision is made of their legal status, it is decreed that the Jews be forbidden to settle anew outside of towns and boroughs, exceptions being admitted only in the case of existing Jewish agricultural colonies. 2. Temporarily forbidden are the issuing of mortgages and other deeds to Jews, as well as the registration of Jews as lessees of real property situated outside towns and boroughs, and also the issuing to Jews a power of attorney to manage and dispose of such real property. 3. Jews are forbidden to transact business on Sundays and on the principal Christian holy days. the existing regulations concerning the closing of places of business belonging to Christians on such days to apply to Jews also. 4. The measures laid down in paragraphs 1, 2, and 3 shall apply only to the governments within the pale of Jewish settlement. That is, they shall not apply to the 10 governments of Poland. The May laws also severely limited the ability of Jews to make a living in Russia's emergent industrial economy. Jews may be admitted as members by a majority vote of the stockholders, the law said, but they may not hold appointments as officers of such companies. Only a certain proportion of Jews, moreover, may be admitted, the number being limited to 1/10 of the total number of shareholders. In Russia, there was a clear-cut answer of who was Russian and who was not. A Russian was a white Caucasian communicant of the Russian Orthodox Church and a loyal subject of the Tsar. A Jew could never be a true Russian, even if he or she converted to Christianity. Konstantin Papadanatsev made a cold prediction about the future of Russia's Jews. 1/3 will die, 1/3 will leave the country, and the last third will simply be completely assimilated within the Russian people. After the promulgation of the May laws, Konstantin Papadanatsev granted an interview to the British journalist Arnold White, who himself was an advocate of restricting Jewish immigration to the United Kingdom. The characteristics of the Jewish race are parasitic. For their sustenance, they require the presence of another race as host, although they remain aloof and self-contained, he told White. Take them from the living organism, put them on a rock, and they die. They cannot cultivate the soil. When asked about whether Jews could be a productive middle class of artisans and businessmen, Papadanatsev doubled down. The Jewish artisans are not really artisans, only colorably so. And they adopt the calling of an artisan in order to become brokers, hucksters, and middlemen. He then cited a Russian government study that supposedly found out that of 30 Russian Jewish watchmakers, only 2 truly knew their trade. And the other 28 were merely moneylenders and middlemen. White claimed that his interview with Papadanatsev was done at the behest of Baron Maurice de Hirsch, one of Europe's most generous benefactors of Jewish immigration from Russia, as part of a fact-finding mission. The pogroms and the May laws were a loud and clear signal. The Jews were no longer safe in Russia. Beyond Odessa, Great Britain had long been a beacon for Jewish liberty. Several prominent Jewish families had already been elevated to the peerage during the reign of Queen Victoria. Lionel de Rothschild blazed a trail by becoming the first practicing Jewish member of Parliament in 1858. After refusing to take his seat 3 times because, as an MP, he had to swear his oath on a Christian Bible, he relented when he was allowed to use a copy of the Old Testament. Yet for most Eastern European Jews, there was only one true beacon of hope that promised escape from the anti-Semitism that pervaded the Russian Empire. That beacon was the United States of America. There was one problem: getting out of where they lived as safely and inexpensively as possible. Albert Ballin, the general director of the Hamburg America line, and other German lines would solve that problem. This was a reading of a section of my book, The Last Ships from Hamburg, which was published in 2023. And this episode, or this discussion, shows the roots of anti-Semitism in Russia and a conspiratorial mindset that has spread from Russia to other countries. And I think it's an important lesson to ponder this form of anti-Semitism in today's environment. This is Stephen Ujifusa, and this is Wet Lunch on the High Seas. Thank you for listening.